Imagine standing on a quiet hillside in 1814, watching the greatest commander in Europe climb into a carriage for exile, not because he was outnumbered, not because fate betrayed him, but because three decisions he believed would secure his empire and instead shattered it. This is how Napoleon Bonaparte destroyed himself. At the start of the 19th century, Europe was chaos. Monarchies clashed, empires trembled, and the continent was a chessboard of power. Into this chaos stepped a young general from Corsica, brilliant, ruthless, unstoppable. He crushed coalitions, redrew borders, crowned himself emperor, and built the most feared army in history. But even empires of steel have cracks, and Napoleon would create three fatal ones. By 1807, Britain stood alone against France, protected by the sea. Napoleon tried to starve the island with the Continental System, a ban on all European trade with Britain. In theory, smart. In reality, disaster. Europe needed British goods, textiles, sugar, industrial products. Prices soared, smuggling exploded, and cities rioted. France wasn't punishing Britain, it was punishing itself. To enforce the embargo, Napoleon invaded Portugal, marching through Spain. What he expected to be an easy occupation turned into the first real wound for his empire. Spain erupted into guerrilla warfare. Priests denounced Napoleon as the Antichrist. Peasants with hunting rifles ambushed French columns. By the end, Napoleon had poured 300,000 soldiers into Spain and still couldn't hold the roads. For the first time, the empire was bleeding faster than it could heal, but he doubled down. And that stubbornness set the stage for his next mistake. Russia quietly broke the embargo, and Napoleon reacted with fury. In 1812, he led the Grande Armée of 600,000 men into Russia, the largest army Europe had ever seen. But Russia wasn't a battlefield. It was endless distance, scorched earth, and brutal winter. Villages burned, supplies vanished, and the Russian army retreated, leaving Napoleon to chase ghosts. At Borodino, they clashed in a bloodbath, both sides shattered. Napoleon entered Moscow expecting surrender, only to see the city burn. With winter closing in, starvation, disease, and Cossack raids decimated his army. Of 600,000 men, fewer than 50,000 survived. After Russia, France was weak. Austria and Prussia plotted. Britain poured gold into coalitions. Even his allies abandoned him. Yet multiple times the Allies offered peace treaties. Napoleon could keep his throne and France's borders. But he refused, believing one more victory or one last miracle would save the empire. No miracle came. By 1813, the Allies advanced from all sides. Coalition armies tightened around France, and Napoleon's marshals began to doubt him. Battles in Dresden, Leipzig, and across the French frontier exhausted his remaining forces. The empire that once dominated Europe was collapsing, undone not by enemies alone, but by the hubris of its own leader. In April 1814, Napoleon abdicated. He placed his sword on a table. The imperial eagle cracked behind him. The man who had once ruled nearly all of Europe now sailed into exile on Elba. History remembers him as a genius, a reformer, a titan of war. But his downfall was not fate, it was decisions. The Continental System that strangled Europe, the Spanish Guerrilla War that bled his army, and the invasion of Russia that destroyed his greatest strength. Great empires rarely fall from outside forces. Most collapse from within. If you enjoyed this cinematic journey through history, subscribe for more forgotten stories, epic battles, and turning points that shaped the world.